para eu poder gravar nesse computador aqui também.
Deixa eu me achar aqui, minha querida.
Gravação por.
Ah, pronto. Eu só posso desse aí te colocar como host. Olha que coisa estranha. Pois é.
Uau! Acabou os co-hosts, talvez?
Co-host.
Deve ter limite.
Eu tiro o meu. Você quer que eu tire o meu e você grava, então?
Tiro da Juliana e eu gravo.
Tá. Cadê
Eu
a
vou ter que
Juju?
sair às 4.
É.
Tá bom, deixa eu achar você, Juju, só um pouquinho. Aqui, achei, Juju. Eu vou tirar o seu, vou ver se é isso. Não, também, engraçado, eu não posso tirar o co-host, eu só posso fazer a pessoa host. Estranho, né? Sempre aprendendo coisas que eu não queria aprender sobre o Zoom.
Eu acho que é porque ela começou a gravar, você não pode tirar o co-host dela.
Eu acho também.
A Ju, pede para ela parar de gravar, então. Vamos ver se dá certo.
Parei.
Tenta agora.
Só host, não consigo fazer você co-host no gravação.
Ah. Bom, então coloca host, eu gravo.
Só que aí eu caio.
Você cai,
Perde
não,
as configurações que a gente já colocou de intérprete.
Sim, perde tudo.
Tá, então deixa.
Eu tô
Eu
gravando.
preciso, então, de... Tem mais alguém gravando em português? Eu tô gravando no áudio original no outro computador.
Eu posso gravar aqui, eu estava gravando no original.
Tá. Então é isso.
E eu tô gravando no original no outro. Então acho que tá ok.
¿Necesitas que grabe? Yo tengo, no sé por qué puedo grabar si necesitas grabar.
A ver, Mari. ¿Sí? ¿En portugués?
Tal vez
o
en el audio original y yo
Audio
puedo
original.
grabar entonces en portugués.
Ok.
Eu puedo
bien?
cambiar no outro computador para português e deixamos Mari em original.
Audio
Perfecto,
original.
entonces. Ajá. Creo que...
Podemos invitar as pessoas para se juntarem a nós outras? Então vamos começar, vamos convidar as pessoas a entrarem. We will invite all to enter the room, ok?
Un buen evento a todos nosotros. Let's have a great event.
Gracias.
Olá a todos e todas. Olá a todos e todos. Hello, everyone.
Gracias, Caetano, por invitarme. Soy muy feliz, muy amable. Es como descifrar signos sin ser sabio competente. Volver a ser de repente tan frágil como un segundo. Volver a sentir profundo como un niño frente a Dios. Eso es lo que siento yo en este instante fecundo. Se va enredando, como en el muro la hiedra, y va brotando como amor, como el mosquito y la piedra. Como el mosquito y la piedra, y sí, sí, sí. Mi paso retrocedido, cuando el de ustedes avanza, el arco de las alianzas ha penetrado en mi nido, con todo su colorido, se ha paseado por mis venas y hasta la dura cadena el destino es como un diamante fino que alumbra mi alma serena. Se va enredando, enredando, como en el muro la hiedra, y va brotando, brotando, como el mosquito en la piedra. Como el mosquito en la piedra, ay, sí, sí, sí. ¿Qué puede el sentimiento? No lo ha podido él saber, ni el más claro proceder, ni el más ancho pensamiento. Todo lo cambia al momento, cual mago condescendiente
Olá, todo
nos
mundo.
aleja dulcemente de rencores y violencias.
Todo mundo me escutando?
Sim.
Bem-vindos. Bom, se vocês já participaram de algum evento do QSA, eu vou fazer alguns recadinhos muito rápidos em português, inglês e espanhol, então vou pedir um pouquinho de paciência. Hola a todos y todas, si ustedes ya han venido a algún evento de la red QRCA, les pido un poquito de paciencia que tengo que hacer algunos recados en portugués, español y en inglés. Hello everyone, welcome all. If you've been to any QRCA event, you probably know that I will make some announcements in Portuguese, English and Spanish. So please keep up with me, okay? Bom, o evento hoje nós teremos, ele vai ser falado em espanhol e em inglês, tá? Mas a gente vai ter durante o evento inteiro a tradução ao português. Então, para quem quiser ouvir a tradução inteira em português, tem um globinho na parte de baixo que vocês podem escolher ou a tradução ou o canal português, ou o canal, se vocês deixarem no canal sem selecionar nenhum, vocês vão ouvir o evento inteiro em inglês e em espanhol. Quando alguém estiver falando inglês, a gente vai ter algumas legendas em inglês mesmo, que talvez possa auxiliar na leitura, na compreensão, ok? Hola, bueno, este evento se realizará en inglés y en español, y la traducción simultánea por todo el evento se brindará al portugués, ¿ok? Entonces, si ustedes quieren elegir escuchar en portugués, hay un pequeño globo abajo que pueden elegir el portugués. Si no eligen nada, van a escuchar el evento. Cuando hablan en inglés, van a escuchar en inglés, y cuando hablan español, van a escuchar español. Para ayudarles con el inglés, tendremos como subtítulos en inglés. Entonces, cuando alguien habla en inglés, los subtítulos también estarán en inglés y tal vez pueda ayudarles un poquito a comprender un poco mejor. ¿Está bien? Hello all. The event will be held in English and in Spanish. So and we will have simultaneous translation into Portuguese. So you can, there's a small globe under the bar below. You can choose the interpretation, and then you can choose Portuguese. If you choose Portuguese, you will listen everything in Portuguese. And if you don't choose anything, you will listen the event in English when someone speaks English, and then in Spanish when someone speaks in Spanish, okay? For the, when someone speaks English, we will have some subtitles, then you can read what you get the English better what the person is saying. Now I'm gonna, I think everyone is in their right channel, and then I will speak now just in English, okay? Welcome you again. We are the QRCA network. We are very pleased to have you all here. We've been thinking about this panel for a long time. Greg came us with this idea, and we just found that it was like a fantastic idea to try something different that we did until today, right? So thank you all for being here today. Douglas, can you go to the next slide? So we had like 65 registration to participate on this event from people from 8 different countries from Latin America and Europe. So we always show these maps, and we are also very pleased to see people from different parts of the world join us. So welcome all, and I hope this will be a great event. Let me see. Douglas, can you go for the next one? So this will be the last QRCA webinar from this year. We will see again each other in November and for the conference. And we had like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 amazing events during this year. So we want to thank you all for being with us and giving us ideas and everything. And we hope that next year we will have even more in different themes of our events. Now, I think I spoke a lot. Greg, it's up to you to start our great event.
No pressure then. Right. So I thought Sylvia was going to say something about breaking boundaries at this point, but I will say a little bit about that if you like. Many of the participants in breaking boundaries and in with Eve and myself and Sharon, people have been involved in a project called Breaking Boundaries, which Sylvia will be has been posting all over Facebook. Apart from anything else, I'm sure you've seen it. And I think it's a really fantastic project, and it's one which I think we should probably publicize a bit very broadly. But I also think it's been something which has been very during the pandemic. So perhaps we'll say something more about that later at the end. Perhaps we'll have a slide or so. But anyway, so I'll just give you a brief introduction to who I am and why I'm here, and then talk to you a little bit about the format of this particular webinar, workshop, panel session, whatever we like to call it. Okay. So firstly, I'm Greg Stoner. I'm professor in fact, head of department at of accounting and finance in the Adam Smith Business School in the University of Glasgow. In UK terms, it's quite a big university, about 30,000 students, but that's small in terms, in your terms, at least in some of your terms. I run the Department of Accounting and Finance effectively with about between 55 and 60 staff, so it's quite big in UK terms. Most are termed research and teaching staff, a few are termed learning, teaching and scholarship staff. I'm also editor of the journal Accounting Education, which is obviously where this paper was published, along with Barbara Flood and Alan Sangster, who's chief editor at the moment, but beginning to wind down. So a little bit about the paper, just because I'm not going to say very much about the nature of the paper within my actual talk, although we'll refer to it a little bit. The paper came about, as it says in the paper, actually, because we wanted to do something and we weren't sure what to do, and we thought it was important to involve as many people as possible on a worldwide basis. We managed to get it through from start to finish in a very, very short period of time, largely due to the great help of a lot of people, including several of all of the people presenting here today. So, I mean, I can't thank these people too much, to be perfectly honest. I think it's a massive project, and this paper also achieved, for unfortunately just the three of us, as made everyone, but that wasn't possible. But we got the AAA, the American Accounting Association prize for the significant contribution to accounting research this year, which I think is a big, given that we're not American, that's an even bigger accolade, I think. So I think that's really important. The other thing is that this paper, including the things that people here have written, have been read by 30,000 people in a year, which is astronomical. Even the journal publishers are shocked by the number of reads. So this is a paper which has had a big effect. Not so many citations yet, at least, but to me, that's not the important thing. The important thing is that people are reading it and people are learning from it. Anyway, that's enough about the paper for now, because we'll learn a bit more about that later. I'll just say a little bit about the format. All of us who are here who have contributed to the paper are going to do a 6-minute 40-second presentation in the Petakucha format, which is 20 slides of 20 seconds each, which is meant to be a way of making people concentrate their ideas and concentrate their thoughts, and to provide an entertaining presentation, I guess. I didn't know how difficult this was until I tried to do it. This was the first time I've tried to do it, although I've been making other people do them for a very long time. It took me much longer to write this 6-minute presentation than it normally takes me to write a lecture for an hour. So I really appreciate the effort of other people. So we're all 6 of us are going to present. I'll introduce people in order when we get to that point. After that, we're going to have a panel session. And then at the end, each of the contributors is going to give a very brief sum up of what they have got, or what they've learned, or what they've thought about following this event. And then I'll try and round up at the end. Hopefully it will go roughly to time. I'm not sure exactly what roughly to time means in a QRCA context, but we're due to finish in 2.5 hours time. So let's hope this goes well. So without further ado, I think I will ado, not quite the same word, but so I was just looking at the transcript. So I will introduce the first presenter, and please excuse my dreadful pronunciation of Spanish Portuguese names. I try my best, but I'm not always very good. So Professor Gabriel Maria Farias Martinez from Mexico, and it's over to you. I think Douglas is going to share the slides at this point.
Muchas gracias, Greg, y perfectly pronounced in Spanish. You are ready to come to Mexico, to Cancun, Riviera Maya. You are ready.
So long as it's only your name I have to speak, yeah.
Ok. Muy buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Gabriela Farías. Voy a dar mi presentación en español. Mi institución es del Tecnológico de Monterrey, en México. Fue fundado en 1943 por don Eugenio Garzazada. Es una universidad privada que tiene presencia en 26 ciudades en la República Mexicana, y pues que ha tenido una tradición importante en temas de innovación educativa. Aquí nos pueden ver cómo estamos ubicados en 26 ciudades de México. Tenemos en todo México 93,168 estudiantes y cerca de 10,000 profesores en las diferentes escuelas. Nosotros hemos iniciado ya hace 4 años un nuevo modelo educativo basado en competencias y basado en retos, que es una manera de enfrentar los desafíos que la educación superior tiene. Tiene elementos fundamentales: la personalización y la flexibilización del aprendizaje, y profesores innovadores principalmente. Fuimos la primera institución en México en declarar que nos íbamos a línea, y tuvimos, eso fue el 12 de marzo del 2020, fuimos la primera institución que dio este aviso en el país y tomamos la decisión de irnos a digital. Posterior a la declaración del TEC, pues otras universidades se sumaron. Tuvimos el reto de transformar nuestros cursos y nuestra manera de dar, de impartir nuestras materias en una semana. Y para nuestra institución de posgrado, que es EGADE Business School en la Escuela de Negocios, los colegas tuvieron 48 horas para transformar sus cursos al modelo flexible digital. Para las clases cuantitativas, específicamente estadística, contabilidad y finanzas, yo soy profesora en el Departamento Académico de Contabilidad y Finanzas en el Campus Monterrey. Pues el reto fue todavía más interesante, pues el desarrollo de los problemas, el uso de Excel, el uso de simuladores financieros, el acceso a laboratorios que los tenías antes en campus y ahora remotos. Las diferentes aplicaciones y el uso intensivo de tecnologías nos ayudaron muchísimo en esta transición. Aquí se muestran algunas de estas aplicaciones que estuvieron disponibles, pero hubo que trabajar también mucho en la cercanía con los alumnos. Cómo estar cerca con ellos y cómo trabajar la interacción con ellos fue otro reto. Después de 4 semanas, el TEC instituyó un modelo que se llamó Flexible Digital Plus, donde empezamos a colaborar también con otras áreas de la institución para tener bienestar, entrenamiento físico, clases de yoga, relajación, meditación, toda una estrategia de bienestar desde casa y convenios con Coursera y edX para más apoyo en la parte educativa. Trabajamos el reforzamiento en la preparación de nuestros profesores, no solamente en la tecnología, sino en habilidades de interacción. Todos tenían que tener una base común de capacitación en Canvas, en Zoom, en manejo de plataformas, en aplicación. Un gran soporte colaborativo en la escuela por diferentes instancias que nos ayudaron en ventanillas de atención a los profesores las 24 horas, los 7 días de la semana, para estar atendiendo a nuestros profesores y darles un soporte colaborativo. Hicimos cibercafés académicos en ambientes más relajados para darles algunos ejemplos de estas estrategias de colaboración, así con el café y platicar, y también como una manera de que los profesores pudieran compartir su experiencia y compartir con otros colegas y bajar un poco el estrés también. Foros abiertos en línea, donde también hubo más cercanía con altos directivos o con líderes de la institución y con externos también. Y generamos una serie de retos y concursos para que en menos de 5 minutos o en 3 minutos tuviéramos mejores prácticas de profesores y poderlas de una manera muy ágil distribuir en toda la institución para que tomáramos prácticas así como que rápido. Un gran soporte a los profesores. También tuvimos diferentes alternativas para organizar archivos, documentación relevante, poderla compartir, explotar las posibilidades de colaboración de las diferentes plataformas tecnológicas. Y también muy importante, concretamente en el área de contabilidad y de finanzas, se tuvieron que retrabajar todos los contratos de los laboratorios, de los proveedores de las bases de datos, por ejemplo, Bloomberg, Capital IQ, para trabajar en laboratorios remotos o tener accesos más sencillos para los estudiantes y los profesores. También fuimos incluyendo en nuestros casos y en nuestros problemas y en nuestros retos los problemas que estaban sucediendo para muchas compañías mexicanas durante la pandemia, el cierre de empresas, la baja en resultados en la bolsa de valores y tratar de ir haciendo a nuestros alumnos de negocios conscientes de la continuidad de los negocios, retos de liquidez y financiamiento. Todo esto nos hizo darnos cuenta de todas las oportunidades que se generaban con el modelo flexible digital y también todas las oportunidades que se podían desarrollar o que podíamos ir trabajando para mejorar nuestra práctica docente. Un reto muy importante fue la evaluación para nuestros alumnos y aprendimos muchísimas lecciones y creo que lo más valioso es mantener la interacción y mantener herramientas que nos puedan estar facilitando la atención de nuestros alumnos en un modelo flexible digital. Ahora que regresamos a lo híbrido, pues vamos a encontrarnos con el reto de transformar la educación y de encontrar lo mejor de ambos modelos, de lo digital y de lo presencial, para que tengamos experiencias memorables y significativas para nuestros estudiantes y nuestros profesores. Finalmente, también quiero mencionar que ha sido un reto para la profesión organizada en México, porque la educación no solamente es la educación inicial, también el desarrollo profesional continuo de los profesionales en contaduría, y también tuvimos una fuerte para facilitar o apoyar que el desarrollo profesional continuo fuera de una manera más interactiva. Y finalmente, todo esto nos sirve como profesión contable porque en estos días tener habilidades digitales, manejar la tecnología, tener esa agilidad es una competencia esencial para nuestra profesión. Nos toca el reto de sobrevivir a la transformación digital y, bueno, salir adelante con toda la pandemia también como profesión contable y también en la educación de nuestros alumnos. Y muchísimas gracias por la oportunidad de compartir con todos ustedes.
Thank you very much, Gabrielle. As I say, we're going to go through these presentations. So the next one on the list is from Professor Natalia Kruder-Palmer and Professor Oswald Malandro Segovia from Chile. Over to you.
Sí, muchas gracias.
I think Douglas is going to share the screen.
Ahí se ve muy bien. Muchas gracias, primero por la instancia, por lo que nos ha dejado un poco esta crisis sanitaria, que es la posibilidad de realizar este tipo de actividad y compartir experiencias con el resto del mundo de qué es lo que nos está dejando esta nueva normalidad. Un poco contarles lo que ha pasado en nuestro país. Esto lo escribimos en conjunto con Natalia Cuadra, profesores ambos de la Escuela de Auditoría de la Universidad del Paraíso. Y un poco la agenda dice relación con conversar de cómo han cambiado las relaciones en esta nueva normalidad desde el punto de vista de lo que nosotros estamos conversando con nuestros alumnos desde la integridad corporativa, los procesos de transformación digital y los procesos de innovación y adaptación que las diversas compañías han debido impulsar a propósito de esta nueva normalidad. Antiguamente teníamos un poco relaciones más formales, ¿no es verdad? Relaciones presenciales en las cuales se establecían ciertos lazos. Hoy día esos lazos se tienen que establecer a distancia, esos lazos se tienen que establecer a través de una pantalla, una relación virtual. Mismo caso de las clases. ¿Cómo transitamos desde una relación en la cual la presencialidad generaba un lazo, hacia un lazo que se tiene que generar hoy día a través de una plataforma de reuniones virtuales, Zoom, Google Meet, o el que cada uno... Y así es como nosotros reconocimos que los procesos de transformación digital llegaron mucho más rápido de lo que teníamos presupuestado. Y si hay algún vector que impulsó este cambio, sin lugar a duda que fue el COVID-19. Y ahí fue como incorporamos dentro de nuestros procesos de enseñanza y aprendizaje qué es lo que las organizaciones estaban impulsando. Procesos de inteligencia artificial, cómo las juntas directivas estaban analizando la nueva situación de los estados financieros, cómo las organizaciones se estaban transformando digitalmente, y esos casos prácticos los tuvimos que llevar al aula para que nuestros estudiantes pudieran ir incorporando estas nuevas habilidades digitales. Nuevas herramientas en materia de ciencia de datos, Big Data, Machine Learning, procesos automatizados, procesos de robótica que hoy día la contabilidad está incorporando a través de los ERP, que necesitamos poderlos incorporar dentro de nuestras mallas curriculares. Nuevas formas de entender las finanzas corporativas, la sostenibilidad de las compañías, cómo estaban sorteando la crisis. Más que un tema académico propiamente tal de la escuela y de la estructura, los procesos contables de las compañías sufrieron cambios brutales. Y eso tenía también que pasar por el lado nuestro con la finalidad de que en el corto periodo de tiempo los alumnos pudieran capitalizar estos cambios y salir de la mejor forma posible al mercado del trabajo. Entonces ahí nosotros fuimos reconociendo cómo llegábamos a esta evolución digital. ¿Cómo enfrentábamos los nuevos desafíos? ¿Cómo enfrentábamos estos temas de robotización de procesos en la contabilidad, en la finanza, en los procesos de auditoría? ¿Cómo las otras carreras, cómo las otras áreas del saber a nosotros nos entregaban herramientas que podíamos ir incorporando? Acá hay un caso, por ejemplo, de una petrolera en el cual integra todos sus procesos a través de mecanismos automatizados, herramientas de Office, por cierto, pero donde herramientas como Python, R, SQL vienen a alivianar un poco el cargo de trabajo que nosotros tenemos. En el caso chileno, los reguladores también se adaptaron y eso también nosotros tuvimos que incorporarlo. Nuevos mecanismos de fiscalización digital, nueva forma de entenderse con los contribuyentes, con los sujetos obligados en materia de cumplimiento contable, y nosotros, por otro lado, adaptarnos a esas nuevas realidades. Y también, otra cosa que también recogimos es que la forma de interactuar en términos de canales también cambió. Hoy día tenemos redes sociales con cargo al cual podemos comunicarnos de manera más público con nuestros estudiantes, armar grupos en los cuales ellos se sientan cómodos para poder impulsar soluciones a problemas que interactúen dentro de las plataformas donde ellos se sientan más cómodos para poder trabajar de manera colaborativa. La verdad que fue una experiencia bastante fructífera. Estos 2 años nos dejaron bastantes lecciones, nuevos desafíos, y para nosotros este New Normal que emerge, ¿no es cierto?, ex post crisis financiera, nos deja varias lecciones, pero también varios desafíos. Y es que los procesos de transformación digital están afectando a un sinnúmero de operaciones dentro de las compañías, pero también está llegando con fuerza a los procesos contables y también a los procesos de auditoría o aseguramiento que nosotros tenemos que hacernos cargo dentro de la formación. Muchas gracias, ahí están nuestros correos electrónicos. De todas formas, cualquier consulta, sugerencia, vamos a quedar a vuestra disposición.
Thank you very much. That is very interesting, very good. And you'll notice that I'm looking down at other screens. That's because I'm trying to read the translations either on my phone or that I already have. So it's not because I'm ignoring you. I'm just trying to read some of the translations. As I should have said at the beginning, I apologize. My Spanish is non-existent. And I think that's kind of obvious from what I said. All I can do is order beer, really. Anyway, so we now move on to our contributors from Argentina, Professor Inés García Fonti and Professor Oscar Fernandez. I believe they've recorded this.
La Universidad de Buenos Aires es pública y gratuita y este año cumplió 200 años. De ella ingresaron los 5 premios Nobel obtenidos por argentinos. Debido a la pandemia de COVID-19, 280.000 estudiantes han cursado de modo virtual más de 100 carreras en el marco de 13 facultades. La Facultad de Ciencias Económicas cuenta con 1.500 docentes y 25.000 estudiantes transitando 5 carreras. Cursan la carrera de contador público 15.000 estudiantes. A poco de comenzar el año académico, en marzo del 2020, el inicio de una extensa cuarentena interrumpió las clases presenciales. Las medidas restrictivas derivadas de la pandemia de COVID-19 generaron un cambio repentino al transformar el dictado de las clases a la modalidad virtual para gran cantidad de alumnos y cursos, lo que implicó profundas necesidades de adaptación, obligando a transitar un proceso del cual no existían antecedentes. El dispar contexto socioeconómico de Argentina se enmarcaba en problemas de equipamiento y conectividad en general, sobre todo en el caso de los sectores de menores recursos de la sociedad. El traslado de la facultad a los hogares implicó invadir un ámbito privado donde se presentaban temas familiares complejos de resolver. La facultad debió implementar una transformación completa de la modalidad de cursada, que estaba basada en albergar sus 25.000 estudiantes en amplios espacios físicos, divididos en varias sedes. Debió poner a disposición aulas virtuales en forma masiva para más de 1.000 cursos.
Todos estos cambios debieron producirse en un contexto compuesto por una gran disparidad de asignaturas, que oscilan entre algunas muy teóricas, por ejemplo Derecho, otras muy prácticas, por ejemplo Matemáticas, y otras teórico-prácticas como Contabilidad, además de las que corresponden a prácticas profesionales. Se suman los problemas que se presentaron respecto de los docentes, como por ejemplo la consideración de aquellos pertenecientes a grupos de riesgo, las limitaciones de infraestructura y de conectividad, y las necesidades de adaptación a nuevas herramientas tecnológicas, en especial de los docentes que no son nativos digitales. En el caso de los alumnos, estos se vieron afectados tanto por problemas de acceso a una conectividad adecuada como por limitaciones económicas para incorporar tecnología suficiente. También se presentaron problemas de disposición de bibliografía debido a que ésta no se encontraba digitalizada en muchos de los casos. En cuanto a los elementos aportados por la propia institución educativa, la Universidad de Buenos Aires, es de destacar que además de recursos tales como entornos virtuales, software específicos y material didáctico, facilitó el acceso a bibliografía digitalizada mediante convenios con distintas editoriales. Un factor de complejidad fue que durante los primeros meses de la pandemia no le resultó posible a las instituciones educativas realizar una planificación certera, debido a la incertidumbre respecto de la evolución de las medidas gubernamentales dispuestas para afrontar los efectos de la pandemia y la forma que ésta se desarrollaría.
Luego de transcurridos 3 cuatrimestres, los alumnos evidencian una gran adaptación al sistema educativo virtual en los términos que la rápida transición obligó a implementar, aunque al mismo tiempo comienzan a mostrar signos, entre otras cosas, de extrañar el contacto personal con sus compañeros. Al mismo tiempo, en lo que respecta a los alumnos, se evidencia una transformación de la interrelación en el aula a través de la conformación de grupos de WhatsApp y otras modalidades de interacción tecnológica, superando en algunos casos los modelos utilizados cuando el dictado era presencial. Los equipos docentes debieron reaccionar diseñando materiales y dinámicas de enseñanza adaptadas al sistema virtual. A medida que transcurrió el tiempo, las experiencias fueron enriqueciendo el proceso, incorporando cada vez más herramientas y el uso más eficiente de las aulas virtuales y el campus. En relación con el sistema de calificaciones, se fue confirmando la dificultad para diseñar evaluaciones que reemplacen la seguridad que otorga la presencia de los alumnos en el aula física, en cuanto a la posibilidad de confirmar el trabajo individual, aun cuando se vienen utilizando estrategias específicas adaptadas a la virtualidad. ¿Qué es respecto de la modalidad de enseñanza en la Facultad de Ciencias Económicas de la UBA? Muchos especialistas sostienen que la misma decantará en un sistema híbrido. En el caso de nuestra facultad, se compondría por la intercalación habitual y permanente de clases presenciales y virtuales.
Debido a la gran cantidad de cursos masivos y la necesidad de mantener el distanciamiento y la sanitización, la incorporación paulatina de la presencialidad, tanto para el dictado de los cursos como para las instancias de evaluación, obligará a reestructurar creativamente la forma de utilizar el espacio físico. Asimismo, será necesario realizar modificaciones en el máximo de bandas horarias ofertadas, considerar los grupos de riesgo entre los alumnos y sus entornos, como así también entre los docentes. Además, deberá tenerse en cuenta la extensión geográfica de nuestra facultad y de sus diferentes sedes. ¿Qué sucederá a mediano y largo plazo? Se podría presumir que se irán incrementando las clases presenciales, pero manteniendo y aceptando la existencia de clases virtuales solo como complemento. Para ello deberán establecerse parámetros que determinen las condiciones para su instrumentación. Por último, deberían actualizarse las diferentes variables en las normativas del Ministerio de Educación de Argentina para la acreditación de la carrera de contador público. Estamos transitando un periodo de excepción, con modalidades que no se corresponden con las previstas en las normas anteriores a la pandemia. El nivel de incertidumbre que sigue rodeando la situación sanitaria y por lo tanto respecto de las medidas que el gobierno argentino podría adoptar para contener nuevas apariciones del virus dificulta llegar a conclusiones sobre el futuro con alto grado de seguridad. Muchas gracias por su atención.
Thank you very much for that. Very professionally done, I have to say. I hope mine's not too disappointing after these. Anyway, so we now move on to the next one, which includes at least one name I can say, but it's a second one. Professor Claudia Wanderley and Professor Kate Horton from Brazil. And I think they've recorded it too, if I remember rightly.
Hello everybody, it's a pleasure to be with you today to discuss the Brazilian perspectives on account education during the pandemic. Our presentation divided into 4 topics. You'll discuss the Brazilian context, initial responses to the crisis, and the challenges and opportunities for account education in Brazil. Brazil is a large, diverse, and complex country with a volatile institutional environment. Economic and social development in Brazil has faced a constant struggle to overcome a range of different crises. The last decade was particularly difficult for the country, which caused ongoing political economic crisis and a divided society. According to the Global Inequality Report, Brazil has the second highest concentration of income in the world. Brazil also faces inequality between different regions and the urban and countryside areas. For instance, half of the students of Brazil Federal University come from low-income households. Within this context, Brazil is facing the global pandemic. Brazil has the second largest number of deaths from COVID-19 in the world, and it has been widely disrupted by the virus. The Brazilian government response also is very controversial, which further worsened the divides in Brazilian society. We observed two different responses to the pandemic, one from the federal universities, the other from private colleges. Private colleges moved to remote teaching in large numbers, while with 78% of these colleges embraced remote teaching, while federal universities initially put everything on hold. In May 2020, the Brazilian Accounting Association carried out a survey among its members institutions to examine the effects of the pandemic on account education. Lecturers had some experience with remote supervision and online defense, but they also report a number of challenges and difficulties. A weak, unstable and no internet connection and a poor access to the resources and infrastructure necessary to move courses online were reported as main challenges during the pandemic crisis. These problems were key factors for federal university decision to suspend undergraduate courses instead of moving them online. Another challenge was the inadequate training of academics in the use of online tools. Educators have been bombarded by different technological tools. They also felt overwhelmed by technology, which created a sense of frustration, and were constrained by a lack of time and resources. Brazilian educators are faced with significant red tape in federal universities, which may have undermined their efforts to respond to the crisis. The Ministry of Education issued new guidelines to authorize remote teaching in all universities in Brazil, which caused delays and uncertainties for Brazilian educators and students.
Another challenge related to student engagement in the online classes. We were expecting to see a sea of happy faces, but we were often greeted with blank screens. In addition, sometimes students found it hard to find quiet places to work, and we often had unexpected guest appearances from various members of students' families. Research by the ACCA has shown that Generation Z are very worried about the future, and well-being is a major concern among graduates entering the accounting profession. The pandemic has brought this into sharp focus. Indeed, we've seen a sharp increase in mental health problems and an increase in students withdrawing from their programs during the pandemic. On the other hand, there are various opportunities brought about by the switch to virtual working. Lots of students travel long distances to get to university for evening classes, while working in full-time paid jobs during the day. Remote working has cut down commute times, giving students more time to focus on their studies. It allowed us to broaden student networks. For example, we have set up an informal support group for PhD students who have often felt very isolated during the pandemic. The online format allows students to connect with and learn from other PhD students from across Brazil, which wouldn't be possible in a face-to-face format. Many students have also responded positively to the change to remote working, with some lecturers reporting an increase in student attendance levels since the switch to remote teaching. Students seem to be particularly appreciative of interactive tools like Kahoot and are enthused by classes that incorporate these kinds of methods in the teaching. In addition, the pandemic may inspire us to reinvent accounting curricula to better prepare students for the world of work. CIMA conducted research on future skills training, which highlighted the importance of technical skills, business skills, leadership skills, people skills, and digital skills for the future accounting professional. Research also suggests that the roles of accountants may change in the coming years, with an emphasis on less automatable activities, such as applying expertise and managing others. Crucially, the pandemic and the move online may re-energise our attempts to incorporate these skills and may offer an opportunity to include digital elements in the accounting curricula. The pandemic has also caused us to rethink our course assessments, and in some cases to include group tasks alongside individual elements. Recent research has shown that inexperience in teamwork is a common issue among recent graduates in accounting, so this inclusion of group tasks may be valuable in enhancing people and teamwork skills that are vital for future careers.
The pandemic has also pushed students and teachers to be more flexible and creative in their thinking. Brazil is already known for its creative thinking, o jeitinho brasileiro, or the Brazilian way. Flexibility and creativity in program delivery will be vital, and this may enhance students' agile and creative thinking. All of this raises the question of how universities, accounting associations, and the accounting community more generally can contribute to open online platform aimed at enhancing accounting education, and how it can leverage the lessons you have learned from the pandemic to improve accounting education in the future. Thank you very much for your attention. You look forward to discuss these ideas further with you in the panel discussion. Obrigado, gracias.
Thank you very much, Kate and Claudia. That was another very professional recording, which again is going to embarrass me even more when I go completely out of time. I'm beginning to wish that I did mine as a recording too, so I could edit it, but I didn't. Anyway, we move now to the last of our contributors, apart from myself, doing one of these Petacucha sessions. And we have Professor Mariana Vera Colina and Professor Ruth Alejandra, I always get that wrong, Patio Jacinto, I've got that wrong too, I suspect, from Colombia, presenting their contribution.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Ruth Alejandra Patiño y con la profesora Mari Vera Colina queremos compartirles algunas reflexiones sobre la educación contable en Colombia en tiempos de COVID a partir de nuestra experiencia en la Universidad Nacional de Colombia y algunos avances de investigación en el tema. Un aspecto determinante en el contexto es la desigualdad, evidenciado tanto en la disponibilidad de productos y servicios para suplir las necesidades básicas, como en otros que afectan la educación, como el acceso a Internet o a dispositivos. Hay inestabilidad política, alto nivel de corrupción y en el 2021 se presentó un paro nacional con situaciones graves de violencia. Algunos datos de la educación contable en Colombia es que no hay doctorados en contabilidad, existen 10 maestrías, se cuenta con 252 programas académicos y como observan en el mapa, el 52% de los programas están concentrados en las 5 ciudades principales. Eso hace que sea muy inequitativo. Entre los primeros efectos del aislamiento se encuentra que se rompe el proceso de comunicación, ya que no hay respuesta de los estudiantes. No activan cámara y pocas veces hablan. La mayoría de los programas implementaron clases sincrónicas, con lo cual se pierde la flexibilidad y las posibilidades que tiene la formación virtual. Dentro de las preocupaciones de los docentes se encuentra la baja interacción con los estudiantes, lo que hace que cambien las experiencias de aprendizaje y se busquen nuevas formas de comunicación. Además, parece que inicialmente hay aversión a la tecnología, en especial en algunos profesores. Para conocer la situación de los estudiantes se realizan encuestas. También se identifica sobrecarga de trabajo por las labores relacionadas con el hogar, por la necesidad de formarse en tecnología y por el aumento del tiempo en preparación de clases y de evaluación. Preocupa la vida sedentaria que se lleva y el trabajo frente al dispositivo, que en algunas veces se prolonga el fin de semana. Se presenta necesidad urgente de capacitación en diversas herramientas tecnológicas. No se contó con el tiempo para ello, por lo cual ha sido de virtual o a distancia. Los docentes vieron la necesidad de establecer nuevas estrategias de conexión para lograr cercanía con los estudiantes, por lo cual se usó en especial WhatsApp, lo que requirió más tiempo de atención. Se percibe la necesidad de equilibrar el tiempo de estudio, trabajo y vida personal por la posibilidad de estar conectado de forma permanente. Dado que se presentaron cuestionamientos en cuanto a estrategias de enseñanza y aprendizaje usadas en la presencialidad y qué tan útiles son en las clases sincrónicas, algunos docentes han innovado sus prácticas. Del mismo modo, se replantea la evaluación por medio de diferentes estrategias como videos o imágenes. se da la oportunidad de un aprendizaje colaborativo. Se utilizan distintas herramientas y cada uno, docentes y estudiantes, contribuyen con algunos conocimientos. Por otra parte, se identifica que la alternativa de invitar profesores extranjeros o de otras instituciones es una oportunidad. Dado que se modificaron las estrategias de enseñanza-aprendizaje y de evaluación, se percibe una oportunidad en esta última, realizando actividades en las cuales se incentive el desarrollo de pensamiento crítico y se trascienda de lo tradicional basado en la memoria hacia nuevas prácticas. Del mismo modo que los docentes, los estudiantes perciben sobrecarga de trabajo. Muchas veces deben ver nuevamente las grabaciones de las clases por las distracciones que se presentan en las casas. En las clases no hay interacción y al indagar por qué no prenden las cámaras se presentan diversas razones como la inestabilidad del internet. Los estudiantes reconocen que se distraen con facilidad. El entorno no es adecuado ya que hay ruidos como por mascotas, niños o vendedores ambulantes, lo que es muy frecuente en Colombia. Eso dificulta el entendimiento del tema y requiere que repitan las sesiones en las grabaciones. A los estudiantes también les preocupa la vida sedentaria, ya que la mayoría se ejercita. Por otra parte, se presenta deterioro de salud mental causado por problemas económicos, familiares o por limitadas experiencias de intercambio social. Los docentes optan por incrementar las actividades en grupo, lo cual no siempre es bien recibido por los estudiantes. Estos identifican un esfuerzo importante de los profesores por ser divertidos y dinámicos. Sin embargo, se presenta en especial cuando los profesores son jóvenes. Dentro de las ventajas identificadas por los estudiantes se encuentran las grabaciones de las clases, ya que cuentan con este apoyo para resolver dudas y repasan cuando lo consideran necesario. Además, se cuenta con material extra de los profesores que en la presencialidad era material privado y esto se considera muy útil. Por la virtualidad se maneja mejor el tiempo, se presentan más horas de dedicación a la familia, también se evita el tiempo y se hace mayor uso de herramientas tecnológicas. Se ve esto como una ventaja, además se disminuye el tiempo de las horas de clase. Dentro de los aprendizajes está la formación en tecnología, que fue de emergencia, pero sigue siendo muy válida, y por el aislamiento se identifica una ventaja en esa posibilidad de la formación virtual, por lo cual se prevé la consolidación de esta modalidad en la educación contable. Las estrategias innovadoras de enseñanza-aprendizaje y de evaluación aplicadas durante el aislamiento y las clases sincrónicas han resultado útiles y han contribuido a cuestionar prácticas tradicionales. De acuerdo con las palabras de algunos profesores, han llegado para quedarse. Ya sería difícil seguir con las mismas prácticas. Muchas gracias por la atención y estamos atentas a sus comentarios. En la presentación están los correos electrónicos. Siéntanse en la libertad de comunicarse con nosotras, compartir sus experiencias y propuestas de las actividades que estén implementando. Gracias.
Thank you very much. In fact, thank all of you for your very good presentations. And it's now my chance to completely mess it up and show you how not to do these presentations. I can't believe how scared I am of doing this. But anyway, those people who know me know that I normally talk around subjects rather than actually keep to the topic. So this is going to be very scary. Anyway, I'm delighted to be here to share my reflections on this paper, including those at the time we wrote the paper, reflections on the response from Latin America, and my experience and thoughts on what has happened since that time. This paper has been globally successful thanks to many people reading it and downloading it. Okay, and none of this would have been possible without the people who helped us make it, really, particularly the contributors, the 66 people, 45 countries. It was an uplifting experience, and nearly everyone involved and invited reacted very, very positive and very quickly to the process, which was also good. And thanks to all of those. The impact of COVID came as a great surprise, obviously, a great explosion for all of us. Everything normal was cancelled. As editors, we wanted to support our accounting education community, particularly as our own conference was cancelled at short notice, and we lost the opportunity to welcome our community to Glasgow. As editors, we wanted to support our accounting education community, particularly as that conference has gone. We wanted to try and get some sharing of ideas in order to provide some support on the basis of a problem shared is a problem halved, and to try and help us feel less isolated from each other, which was a big problem. My first contributions was fear. Fear of COVID, yes, fear of the unknown, obviously, but particularly in terms of how we taught, fear of going online and doing things that we had not tried before. Also concern about isolation, both of ourselves, from our colleagues and students, and between academics and their student communities. Many challenges were raised, some are in the paper, in the tables and the text, but these don't really tell us the personal stories of the contributors. This is in their contributions, and this is, I think, the real strength of the paper. The personality comes through in those individual contributions. There was clearly a need for an emergency response. We had to do some of classes which hadn't finished for many of us. Most initially took a blended approach. Then, as COVID developed, a move to more fully online. Many also wrote about their immediate plans for the next semester, the next year, depending on where in the world we were, and how difficult it was to even know what to do. Another thing that struck me was the impact of COVID on widening many deprivations and inequalities. Technical problems, lack of data, computers, skills, people not knowing how to do things. But one of the things that struck me most was the lack of space for students and some staff who didn't have places to do their work in an efficient way. I think that skips a slide. Oh, there we go. What has worked traditionally does not work. I think we skipped a slide, Douglas, anyway, but yeah. What has worked traditionally does not work online. We need to change, or do we? Can we get away with what we've done in the past? Are there risks? Many people wrote about new forms of assessment that work better in an online environment, and perhaps this is a positive outcome. Perhaps we can think about ways we can move from testing knowledge to testing high-level attributes. Another issue that was raised was that of professional accreditation or validation and our relationships with the profession. Clearly, there are issues here. Many of the institutions gave emergency adjustments, but not all did. This is an outstanding issue which we have to work on with our partners, the profession, as time goes by. Another issue that was evident to me, both in the reports and personally, particularly personally, was the various degrees of institutional chaos. Perhaps chaos is too strong a word, especially in relation to communication of institutional plans, what we were actually going to do, and a whole raft of different support problems, particularly technical staff and student support. But one of the most profound things that comes out of nearly all the reports, I think, is stress. Profound stress and incidents of near burnout, and this has got worse over time. The pressure of working with an emergency, and this wasn't just staff, students too were also suffering stress in this idea. But there was also some optimism, particularly arising from blended being some student-centered approaches and ability to move to some sort of flipped pedagogy and move away from teaching just knowledge to thinking about the critical skills more, and also the ways that this approach provides potential for greater accessibility. But as our experience since support this optimism, I think there is some scope for optimism, but issues have arisen. The quality of the emergency materials are not always brilliant. Perhaps we should be thinking about what we keep and what we don't keep, but also we need to be aware of the inertia, the sticking to the tradition. Be aware of that problem. My experience has also been mainly as a manager, and there have been significant pockets of inertia amongst staff and students. We've seen very few cases of COVID actually. Resource demands have been significant, really significant in terms of producing online materials, but stress has been the biggest issue. On the whole, it appears that most accounting education has been pretty resilient. Our programs have survived, but there have been casualties. But is survival enough? There is a need for us to develop and to take full advantage of our new modes and our new pedagogies. Clearly, there are a high degree of social economic inequality. These varies between different countries, but this exists in the richer countries as well, and it's also widened during COVID everywhere. We have moved towards a more appropriate accounting education model, but we need to develop this further. We need more critical accounting education, one which fits the skeptical profession we're meant to be moving to. We face a maze of problems. We are happy to keep the new materials. Are we happy to keep them even if they're not good enough? How do we unwind the emergency changes that we don't need? How do we use the accelerated learning and incorporate the best resources we have produced? How do we avoid the pull of the past, the inertia? My feelings are very complex over this period, but they've been dominated primarily by exhaustion. I'm happy for the support of the accounting education community and that of QRCA through Breaking Boundaries particularly. Although troubled by some difficult managerial issues, overall I have a hope for a better future for accounting education in the world that is learning to cope with COVID. And lastly, we need more research both on post-COVID accounting education and on the lessons that we've learned from surviving and getting through this pandemic. We have learned a lot. We need to record and validate the lessons learned, and we need to continue to broaden and strengthen the accounting education community. As the editor of the journal Accounting Education, I look forward to publishing your research contributions in this area. And lastly, and this is probably not in the paper, in the context of the presentation really, just so you know, we are expecting with Sylvia and others to be launching a call for papers for a special edition on Latin American accounting education, which we are hoping to launch at the QRCA main conference. So hopefully we'll have some more material available for that there. And thank you very much. And thank you very much, Douglas, for holding back some of the slides occasionally, as I was clearly overrunning. Anyway, so that ends our initial presentations, so you know where we're starting from. And what we're now meant to be doing is having a panel session. And of course, normally that would mean that however many of us it is, about 7 of us, I think, would be sitting at the top of the table and you would be throwing questions at us. And in this environment, in Zoom, I'm not quite sure how that works. I'm not even sure if it's clear who the contributors are. So you've not set this, I mean, I'm looking at this in gallery view. I assume, have you set this up in a panel view, Sylvia, or no? Okay, so can the people who are on the panel at least raise their hands so that and put their camera on so that people can see who we are? Okay.
You can raise the hand. Yeah.
Physically raise your hand is kind of easy, I think. Okay. So the purpose of this next part is really for you as the rest of the contributors here to ask us questions or to raise issues that have been important in your environment, and we will try and comment on that. This is not going to be easy with so many people, but anyway, we will try. So over to the floor. Anybody who wants to present? And Sylvia, can you help me keep an eye on the chat and to find people who are putting their hands up, please?
Yes, sure, Greg.
And does anyone want to translate that in case? So anyway, over to the questions or comments.
Just a reminder, guys, you can write your questions on the chat, or you can, open your mic and ask, okay? Solo un recuerdo, ustedes pueden abrir su micrófono y hacer las preguntas, o pueden escribir en el chat, okay?
¿Puedo hacer un comentario mientras llegan las preguntas?
It's like one of those quiet classrooms.
Mari, creo que yo estaba escuchando usted un poco bajito, no sé si estaba...
Sí, puede que ahora es que tengo que cambiar
Sí, ahora
micrófono. Sí,
sí.
mejor, sí. No,
Ujú.
mientras tenemos preguntas para comenzar, porque, bueno, personalmente, una de las preocupaciones o una de las cuestiones que más me ha generado como algún tiempo de reflexión antes de la situación de pandemia y ahora más, y fue algo que escribíamos con Alejandra en la contribución, era lo relacionado con evaluación, porque realmente desde antes de que se generara todo esto la pandemia, siempre me he preguntado, bueno, ¿y qué evaluamos? Solo por mencionar un caso que hago en mis clases, yo dicto contabilidad financiera y siempre pues recibo a los estudiantes con la preocupación de la memoria, cómo voy a responder un examen. Y yo les digo, no, pues que no me interesa la memoria porque usted cuando sea profesional necesita responder a un cliente o a un compañero de trabajo o a un jefe y va a tener todo a su disposición. O sea, ¿para qué memorizar? O sea, en una evaluación en el aula, pues use lo que quiera. Simplemente responda a un caso de estudio. Ahora en pandemia, pues ya no están en el aula, o sea, ya no están encerrados en una cárcel, si donde no pueden mirar a ninguna parte y los tenemos pues que dejar que consulten cualquier cosa. Entonces, en resumen, creo que la evaluación es un gran reto y que nos lleva a pensar muchas cosas, ¿no? Voy a resumir un poquito en inglés para Greg y dejo entonces para que podamos, si les parece, conversar un poquito sobre evaluación, que creo que no es solamente algo que nos afecte en pandemia. So just for you, Greg, it's just a summary in English. I was talking about one of my concerns related to assessment, even before the pandemic was one of my concerns regarding to, in my case, my students. I teach mostly, or one of my courses is related to financial accounting in undergraduate level. So in my case, when my students are in my module, they are always like worry about the memorization of the standards and how it's going to be the exam. And my answer before the pandemic was, I don't care if you have the standard there, you need to just check the materials, your books, your computers, because when you are going to be in the practitioner life, you need to check the information and just answer to your client or to your colleagues with information is available to you. So now in pandemics, this is like a growing concern because you don't have the student in the jail in the room. You need to move forward with assessment. So that's the summary of I was explaining in Spanish. So my idea to discuss in the panel. With pandemic or without pandemic, what can we do with assessment?
I don't know. I don't want to dominate the discussion, so I'm happy for somebody else to say something first. If not, I will definitely say something on this topic. I feel very strongly about it, I'll be honest. Does anybody else want to say anything before I say my part? I will. Nobody seems to be shouting. You have to jump in pretty quick if you're going to get in before me. So I think assessment is one of the biggest problems in our education system, full stop. And it's worse in accounting education, I think, than in many other disciplines. In the past, we've relied very heavily on tests which are either about memory, do they know stuff, or speed of technical skills. Can they do the balance sheet in 45 minutes in an exam or something like that? And clearly in a post-pandemic or in a pandemic world where, and we are under pressure at my university to never go back to exams in jails, as Mary said, quite nicely put it. I think we may have to for accreditation and professional reasons to some extent, but the problem is that doesn't really test what students really need to do in the real world. It doesn't really test, neither of those things really test what's important. We can all look up what a standard is by actually going online, and in the real world, we probably would. Just like when I go to a doctor, they're not afraid of looking at the screen to tell me what drugs do and what side effects are. We don't think any less of them for that, and I don't think people think less of us as accountants for checking our facts. In fact, they might even appreciate it. So it really means we have to think about more about turning our assessments to assessing whether students can interpret those things, can understand how to apply those ideas. And in many senses, these do not have to be at least as time limited as the sorts of exams we're used to setting. Yes, it's difficult to set exams in this environment, particularly for those of us, and I do partly include me in this, us, who are very used to setting particularly the time limited technical exams. I've never really favoured the memory exams, but the time limited technical stuff I have set a lot in the past. But we have to think of inventive ways of doing these things. And personally, I think that's better than trying to make somebody's home a different jail, i.e. through proctoring software. Not least because I think it's very, of the student in there, wherever they're doing the exam, is not only fraught with problems and errors, it's also massively difficult for those people who don't have their own room at home where they can sit quietly without disturbance, because the proctoring software will pick up somebody else coming into the room as probably somebody cheating. And that is not fair. So we have to think about better ways of doing this where we can, but the professional constraints are a big problem. They certainly are in the UK. We have been given leniency, but that runs out at the end of December. And the pandemic hasn't finished. So we are trying to negotiate, but it's not really working. We are going to have to return to some of these things. Can we do it? Yes, we can, but it's difficult. So anybody else is on the panel's thoughts on this, or anybody else at all, actually?
Camila raised her hand. So if you agree, Greg, I will
of course,
call Camila.
Oi, gente. Conseguem me ouvir?
Hello.
Sim, conseguimos, Camila.
Espero que estejam todos bem. Eu vou tentar falar em português e depois eu vou tentar falar em inglês. Em português dá para falar, né, gente? Eu vou tentar, na verdade, em inglês. É muito interessante ouvir as experiências, né, as falas, porque são experiências de muitos lugares diferentes. Em alguns pontos elas se convergem, em outros pontos tem algumas diferenças, mas aqui estamos falando sobre educação contábil. Eu fico sempre pensando, então, nas pessoas que estão envolvidas nesses processos, né? Sejam estudantes, sejam professores. Dito isso, eu gostaria de saber quais são as ações institucionais para suporte à saúde mental que essas diferentes instituições promoveram durante esse período pandêmico. Nós estamos aqui olhando, né, várias ferramentas, né, tecnológicas, por exemplo, muito interessantes, só que eu fico sempre refletindo sobre o lado humano de tudo isso, né? São pessoas muito diferentes, nós estamos ali vendo câmeras desligadas, sem ter noção de onde esses estudantes estão, quais são as condições materiais que eles têm ali, né, para assistirem às aulas, né? São, pelo menos aqui no Brasil, os estudantes de contabilidade são muito diversos, tem muitas mulheres, LGBTs, muitas pessoas de classes sociais mais baixas, muitas pessoas negras, então é muito diverso. Então, ouvindo as diferentes experiências, fiquei curiosa para entender quais são, como eu falei, as ações institucionais que as respectivas universidades promoveram no que tange à saúde mental. So now I will try to translate this for English. So I was listening to all of these different. I was listening for all of this really rich experience. So, and now I am wondering which kind of actions the institutions have for the support for the mental health of the student, not only the students, but also for the professors and the faculty members involved in all of this process. Because here we are talking about accounting education, the tools, the technologies involved on this process, but I am thinking about the human side of all of this process. I don't know if this is understandable. Thank you.
It is.
Solo para completar, Mari escribió en español también lo que Camila dijo nosotros. Su cuestión es saber cuáles son las condiciones institucionales de cómo se han promovido la salud mental. Pues aquí hablamos bastante en las herramientas y todo más, pero cómo las instituciones educacionales están tratando los retos de la salud mental de los estudiantes, pero también de los profesores. Creo que es eso.
I would like to know. Yes, thank you, Gabriel. I'd like to know.
No, go ahead, Greg.
No, you first.
Oh, well, Camila, what I can share with you with what we are doing here at my institution, because after the crisis of COVID and all these movements and change that we have experienced in the past year, our institution begins a process of wellness, but not only a process. It creates a new direction, an administrative direction, and give a structure and give budget to to develop actions for providing tools for for students, for professors, and for all the collaborators. And we are thinking about wellness in different dimensions. It's mental, physical, spiritual, and financial. Is what I can share. I will look if we have this or link in order to share with you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask everyone, does it work?
We are beginning with that, Greg, but last year, for example, with what I can share with you is personally, as a professor, I have experienced this support for mental health when you are overstressed, and also with my students. I have the confidence to refer my students to a professional that I know can help them to look ahead.
That's really positive. Does one of our other contributors want to comment?
Yeah, I can say something too. Hello, share a bit of experience in Federal University of Pernambuco. You got some support, but it's very general. You have like 25,000 students, and they create a direct line you can call and share, but I'm not sure that's working for such a large audience. And you have some kind of more led to each individual to set your own network, maybe like informal way. But I would say that the level of support is not that great. It's more lack of resources, and we are too big, like 20,000 students and staff, and it's quite make it a bit difficult to deal with that. I don't know what's happening in São Paulo University, Silvia can tell us as well. But in Brazil, I have this direct line in my university, but I try to set some informal networks, but it's up to each lecturer. So this is our experience in terms of well-being.
Yeah, this is a very big problem. We have had mental health services for many years, both for staff and for students. Traditionally, students, I mean, they can get all students can get an immediate piece of help, but it's sort of limited to a few minutes. But then there's to wait some time for those, and similarly for staff. And I will admit that I too have been to a counsellor to do with the stress created with my job, and this is provided, in fact, anonymously. It's according to the university, so the university don't know, but I'm telling you. And this is a very useful service, I think, and it's been around for years. But I think it is much more used now than it was, for obvious reasons. And I haven't heard any statistics on this, but I do get the impression from some students that it is getting more difficult to get the depth of service that is sometimes required. So even in institutions which have had this set up for a long time, there are problems in this respect. There was an interesting occurrence at the beginning. We had a load of students in hall who all got COVID right at the beginning of the last academic year. But the university responded in a massively positive way by providing counsellors, by providing volunteers, academic staff. We volunteered to do things, either calling them on Zoom or delivering food, delivering other things. So the university here is quite well organised in this respect, but it is not without problems. I don't think we're ever going to solve all of these problems. And I think the biggest problems, really, and I think this is the case for students and staff, is particularly in relation to mental health, which is that many people are too embarrassed to ask for the help. They think it's a sign of weakness. Clearly, I'm admitting that I've done it, so I don't think it's a sign of weakness. I think it's a sign of common sense and strength, in a sense. But there we go. But it's a problem that I think COVID is. It's one of those areas where the deprivation is perhaps a strong word, but that deprivation is widened, I think, because so many people are in problems. But that's a difficult issue. Do we have any other questions or comments on that issue?
Quería apenas hacer un comentario, Greg, si puedo. Yo hablaré en español. Después invito a las otras panelistas que también hagan sus comentarios sobre este asunto que es muy importante, sobre la salud mental. La Universidad de São Paulo empezó con un escritorio, una oficina de salud mental central antes de la pandemia, por cuenta de las presiones de la vida académica y sus efectos en los estudiantes, que eran muy serios. Pero la atención eran los estudiantes. Entonces, los profes y mismo las otras personas que trabajaban en la universidad no tenían tanta atención. El primer foco de atención eran los estudiantes. Y después cuando empezó la pandemia, lo que pasaron a hacer es tener como encuentros con los estudiantes como este que estamos teniendo, para hablar sobre la salud mental y hablar sobre estrategias que podían tener en cuenta para ayudar con la salud mental durante la pandemia. Pero en realidad yo estoy de acuerdo con Claudio que el porte de nuestras instituciones hace con que cualquier estrategia de atención a la salud mental sea en parte difícil de poner en práctica, porque si piensan en la Universidad de São Paulo como 90.000 estudiantes, más de 5.000 profesores, casi 15.000 funcionarios, es un porte tan grande que cualquier acción tiene que ser muy bien coordinada para cuando empiece alguien a hacer uso del servicio para que tenga la atención que necesita. Pero lo que me preocupa más son los estudiantes en situación de vulnerabilidad, que ya están en una condición que necesita más atención. Y eso me parece que tal vez la universidad, por cuenta de cómo llega la crisis, no tuve tantos recursos para hacer lo que era más necesario para este grupo de estudiantes, a quien les faltaba, por ejemplo, acceso a la internet, computadoras, un lugar seguro para se quedar. Entonces, este me parece que es un reto que la universidad tiene y que una universidad de porte de la Universidad de São Paulo tiene mucho más. Pero estoy de acuerdo también con Greg, que tenemos que empezar a hablar de salud mental. Por eso agradezco mucho, mucho a Camila que ha traído este asunto para esta mesa de debates. Y quería mucho oír de todos los panelistas y las panelistas sobre las acciones que sus instituciones tienen tomado en esa dirección, que para mí es una preocupación con la academia en general, no solo durante la pandemia, con las presiones que tenemos de, por ejemplo, evaluaciones, presiones de siempre estarmos entregando muchas tareas o publicando muchos artículos o revisando muchos artículos o haciendo investigaciones. Entonces, quería oír un poco más ustedes todos, si pueden, sobre este asunto que pienso que es muy importante y que se tornó más difícil durante la pandemia.
Thank you. Looks like Ruth wants to say something. So. Sorry, Ali. I should say Ali. Oh, I wish I could pronounce it. I always get it wrong with this J in the middle. Is it Alejandra?
Alejandra.
No. Alejandra, that's right.
Esta pregunta me dejó un poco preocupada porque yo tengo la percepción que en Colombia no hay una claridad. Inicialmente yo no me atreví a responder porque creo que no hay como una planeación, así como algunos de ustedes lo mencionaban, de un programa específico, con presupuesto, con toda la formalidad. Yo me atrevería a decir que en nuestro contexto no lo hay. Se hacen algunas actividades, por ejemplo, un curso de yoga, algunas actividades de este estilo, pero no con esa planeación y esa intencionalidad de prevenir riesgos. Y no porque no sean necesarios, porque incluso las cifras de suicidio y todo esto se han incrementado de forma dramática. Entonces sí creo que es un aspecto de alarma, incluso de acuerdo a lo que mencionaba Greg, yo creo que estamos cayendo en el síndrome de burnout, ¿no? Entonces lo que mencionaba Silvia del artículo, la clase, ya las barreras de los horarios se han caído por la posibilidad de estar conectados todo el tiempo. Para los estudiantes hay otro factor y es que muchas veces en sus casas no tienen espacios adecuados, entonces tienen que estar pendientes de su clase y también de su entorno. Entonces hace falta de respeto frente a esos espacios físicos y de tiempo, creo que han generado una alarma y que debe ser un aspecto de especial interés para todos nosotros.
I have a question. I don't know.
I think Claudia has a hand. Mary Claudia.
Yeah, no, yeah, Greg, you can read the chat. I can put some
okay.
summary in English for you.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Bueno, tengo la palabra. Mi amiga Mari va a ser mi traductora. Voy a hablar en perfecto español. Pero sí quiero comentar algo con respecto a la institucionalidad y estoy de acuerdo con lo que decía la profesora Alejandra y lo que decía la profesora Silvia, que digamos, yo diría 2 etapas. Cuando nosotros empezamos en esto, la virtualidad en la Universidad Nacional, el apoyo institucional para los profesores fue tomar cursos fast, cursos rápidos sobre Moodle, sobre Zoom, sobre varias Classroom, para, digamos, dejar de ser, como dijo la profesora, bueno, perdí el nombre de Inés García, de los profesores que son no nativos tecnológicamente, como en mi caso, ¿no? Ese es el único apoyo que tuvimos como los profesores. Pero generalmente la universidad o específicamente nuestra facultad es cierto, se enfocó más en los estudiantes, ¿sí? En atender a los estudiantes, en las clases alternativas de yoga, de administración particular que ocurrió, digamos, en la universidad, y es que la virtualidad ha permitido en Colombia, o permitió el acceso a muchos estudiantes de regiones apartadas en Colombia en unas condiciones sociales difíciles. Eso es una ventaja que yo creo que ha tenido la universidad. Estudiantes que pudieron acceder a la Universidad Nacional, que es la única universidad, digamos, que les permite el acceso subsidiado, ¿no? Una educación subsidiada. Pero sí hubo muchos problemas con esos estudiantes, y yo recuerdo que lo que sí recibí, o sea, el apoyo institucional para los estudiantes, era que yo recibía correos de la Oficina de Bienestar diciéndome: tales estudiantes que están en las regiones más apartadas, se cayó el internet, las lluvias, entonces, profesor, genere garantías académicas para que esos estudiantes puedan presentar los exámenes, los trabajos. Entonces, esas ayudas para los estudiantes, eso fue un apoyo institucional, pero enfocado en los estudiantes, ¿sí? Los profesores no podíamos, si se nos caía internet era grave, teníamos que recurrir a mil formas, pero con los estudiantes sí darles garantías, ¿no? Entonces, en esa situación, digamos, tuvimos que adaptarnos a esas necesidades de los estudiantes, esas condiciones diferentes, de condiciones económicas, como decía la profesora Silvia, difíciles, estudiantes con unos problemas sociales increíbles que a uno no le pasa por la mente. Entonces los profesores hemos tenido que adaptarnos también a esas necesidades, ¿no? Voy a contar el caso retomando de las evaluaciones. Yo opté porque los estudiantes, utilicé la herramienta Zoom con un banco de preguntas, o sea que era imposible el cheating, ¿sí? Yo comprobé que era imposible hacer copia, pero yo qué hice con las evaluaciones, como se caía internet, la lluvia, etcétera, las dejaba 3 días abiertas, o sea que el estudiante podía entrar en cualquier momento a presentar sus evaluaciones, ¿no? Esa es una forma de garantías académicas y no es ser estricto en eso, ¿no? Yo creo que a los profesores nos tocó mentalmente también adaptarnos a muchas cosas, porque muchas veces los profesores somos rígidos. Es mi evaluación, tal fecha, tal día, pero hemos también ampliado y hemos sido un poco más, hemos tomado conciencia, o en mi caso, he tomado conciencia, digamos, de la situación de los estudiantes. Yo creo que eso es fundamental. Los profesores tomamos una actitud diferente a nuestras clases presenciales, ¿no? Porque las necesidades, digamos, en América Latina o sobre todo en Colombia, que presentó la profesora Alejandra, son difíciles para los estudiantes, ¿no? Entonces, digamos, eso fue lo de las garantías, el apoyo institucional más enfocado a los estudiantes y no a los profesores, ¿no? Porque también hemos estado un poco afectados, salud física y mental, el estrés. Y finalmente, yo he hecho un ejercicio todos estos semestres con los estudiantes al final de mis cursos, una evaluación de la virtualidad. Y mentalmente, digamos, los estudiantes han tenido una experiencia que muchos me han dicho: la virtualidad me ha servido para organizar mejor mi tiempo, para distribuir mejor los espacios. Entonces también hay unas ventajas para ellos, para organizarse. Hay unos que decían: yo antes era muy disperso y la virtualidad me ha hecho ser más organizado, ¿no? Y una de las desventajas también que tuvimos es la no, digamos, al principio, el año pasado, los estudiantes encendían sus cámaras, uno que otro encendía sus cámaras, pero la universidad lanzó un comunicado donde decía que no se podía exigir el encender las cámaras por respeto a la privacidad de los estudiantes. Entonces este semestre no conocí a ningún estudiante, no tuve nada así face to face con ninguno, ¿no? Porque es cierto, muchos estudiantes viven en una habitación con su familia, con sus abuelos, con sus niños, entonces es un poco sentirse vulnerable de mostrar su espacio, ¿no? Hay estudiantes debajo de un árbol intentando tomar clases debajo de unas escaleras, porque eso lo han narrado algunos en privado, ¿no? Entonces yo creo que ha sido también una experiencia para nosotros para replantear nuestras formas de comunicación con los estudiantes. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Claudia. I picked up some of that through my Google translation on my phone, and I think some of those ideas, which is much better than the translation in Zoom, but much more difficult to read. I think one of the things that you mentioned there, I think one of the things you're talking about at the end is engagement and people turning on their screens and things like that. I think this is a massive problem for all of us, because we're used to eye contact, we're used to watching people, we're used to, even in a fairly boring, in inverted commas, lecture, we're used to gauging how the room is understanding what you're saying and reacting to that in some way. And this is something which is, I find, almost impossible in an online environment, even in an environment like this one, where lots of people do have their screens on, but the cameras on. I think another thing you were talking about was use of, if I'm correct, was the use of question banks and multiple choice questions. Am I all right? In terms of using large question sets in order to avoid some of the cheating problems. I just wish this was true. I don't think it is true. We have a paper which is going through review, which is almost there but not quite, which basically it is a relatively small study in some ways, but it basically shows that questions set in a remote environment which are in a known question bank get higher marks than those which they have created for themselves. And yes, it's impossible to say students were cheating, but their inference is that it is likely that those questions are pseudo public knowledge because the security on these systems is not great. And that's an issue which is puzzling to me, because it suggests that students are willing to spend massive amounts of time either memorizing lots of different questions or ways of Googling or paying for access to these databases of illicit copies of questions, and probably spending more time and money than it would have done to actually understand the problems in the first place and to be answered the questions. But it appears that that's the case. It's not definitive, but it is indicative. And I think this is a considerable worry for the academy, who think that using these large data sets is going to solve the problem. It may help, but I'm not sure it's going to solve that issue. There may have been other issues raised in those things which I didn't pick up, but Ines has had her hand up for a while. So Ines Garcia, over to you.
Muchas gracias, Greg. Quería comentar que en la Universidad de Buenos Aires, la Facultad de Psicología es la que brindó un servicio en la pandemia, durante la pandemia, o sea, apenas empezó la pandemia, se preparó información y se brindó información hacia la comunidad en general. Y luego lo que se habilitó es un servicio virtual de atención, que no son en concreto consultas que reemplacen la terapia psicológica, sino que son consultas de contención para bajar la ansiedad, y la Facultad de Psicología de la Universidad de Buenos Aires las dividió en lo que es el apoyo a la comunidad en general, a toda la sociedad que sufre la pandemia, el apoyo específico que podían hacer docentes y alumnos, y también el apoyo específico que necesitaban el personal de la salud. Entonces es como que eso estuvo bastante difundido, es como que avanzaron por varios lados. Difundieron unos brochures digitales que enviaron como muy accesibles para toda la comunidad, no en términos universitarios, sino para toda la sociedad, algunos gráficos también y visuales para el que no sabe leer y escribir, y como que de alguna manera si tenía algo, como mencionaron los y las colegas antes, queda aislado y es un problema que tenemos creo que en todos los países, pero bueno, avanzaron por varios lados y mucha gente recurrió a esos servicios. Y también un solo comentario, ¿no? La Universidad de Buenos Aires está en el centro de la ciudad, sobre todo varias facultades, y funciona como de una manera, una de las fortalezas es que funciona muy articulada con la ciudad. Entonces, por ejemplo, está ese servicio de psicología, también hay otros servicios que de alguna manera hacen que se promuevan los lazos de solidaridad entre los alumnos, que puedan acercarse y tener una cocina, preparar cocina, ayudar en los servicios de vacunación. Es como que las redes se hicieron fuertes por varios lados, entre las cuestiones positivas, ¿no? También hay otras negativas.
Thank you very much for that. I must admit, I didn't catch very much of that in English, but I got the impression that a lot of that was about the mental health issue. I would like, because of my interest, I think, to try and turn this conversation to one of two other topics which I think are really important for me. And one is, I do, despite all the problems, have a degree of optimism that this pandemic might create something better than we had before. And one of the things that I think is important is getting students not just to be critical and skeptical in the way that you know, discussion, debate about the standards, do the standards do the right sort of thing, but also being critical in the sort of the bigger critical sense of being willing to question what accounting is for, and what accounting does, and how accounting goes about its process. Not only because the pandemic is a big example of a problem which shows that our society needs a different approach to things and a different way of valuing things. I'll just be interested to know if any of the panel or any of the other people here have any thoughts on how we might turn the pandemic to something positive in that critical sense. And I know that's a difficult question, but
Greg, I will just add, yeah, we have a question related to this topic, so it might, you know, Marcelo asked, you guys understand if there are or will be any further developments on the pandemic context about the accounting curriculum? Bueno, Marcelo ha preguntado muy cerca de que Greg nos dijo ahora, si ustedes entienden que habrá desdobramientos de todo ese contexto pandémico sobre el currículo contable. I think it's like very related to what you're talking.
Yeah, I think there's two issues here. One is what is in the curriculum, and the other is how do we get students to engage with it and to understand it. I think there are two aspects to the same thing, because there's no point teaching students that there are critical things if they don't engage with them in a critical way. But yeah, I think they are related. I think Mary and Gabriel, can't remember who went up first, and I think
yeah, just a comment about mental health, because Camila's question was about institutional conditions, but I think also we need to ask, what are we doing as professors in contact with the students about these issues? I will not say about mental health because it's not our specialty, but for example, in my case, I usually have classes at 11 a.m. My students, my undergraduate students, they have classes at 7 a.m. Then at 9 a.m. then they go to my class at 11. So it's the third class in the morning. I start my class with music. from 11 to 11:15, do whatever you want. What do you want to hear today? Dance, whatever you want to do. They don't turn on the camera also. I barely know some faces, but it's a way to relax, maybe to start the class in another way. Another strategy I try to implement with them is we do a research project at the end of the course. Instead of doing the paper they have to develop during the semester, they can do a video. So some days ago, I received 5 videos. I have 11 research projects from the course, 45 students and 11 projects, and 5 of these groups, they decided to prepare a video about IFRS. I can share this because they decided to do it privately, but really funny ones. So it's a way just to maybe engage with them. We are in pandemic, we are in a different context, and just to have some fun while we are learning accounting. So I think this is related to mental health also. So sometimes it's not only about the institution. I agree that institutional conditions are not enough. Our institutions should be doing more and more, but in some way we can do some small things that help our students that in the case of our university in Colombia, especially we work in the public university. Our students, the inequality conditions, as Alejandra explained, are really difficult, but we can do some things to improve their conditions. So in Spanish, just estaba comentando que nuestras instituciones pues tienen limitaciones fuertes para implementar ciertas estrategias, ¿no? Para ayudar mentalmente a los estudiantes, pero que nosotros como profesores, a pesar de que no somos especialistas en esto, cómo hacer la situación más llevadera, ¿no? Entonces yo daba un ejemplo que yo comienzo mis clases con música, yo enseño contabilidad financiera, enseño IFRS, y por 15 minutos ellos se relajan, se tranquilizan y empezamos la clase. Instrumentos financieros, sí, activos financieros, bonos, pero pues empezamos de una manera un poquito más relajada. También les asignaba un trabajo donde podían hacer un trabajo de investigación tradicional escrito, pero algunos grupos decidieron hacer videos y bien interesantes, ¿no? Entonces como que buscar la manera que también ellos puedan como acercarse a otras formas de aprendizaje de su generación y más aún en pandemia, que les permitan ver la contabilidad de otra manera, un poco conectando con lo que están preguntando de cómo cambiar el currículo. Algunos comentarios de que la salud mental no solamente tiene que ver tal vez con los especialistas en este tema, que es muy importante. Las instituciones tienen que hacer más, sobre todo en el sector público, pero creo que nosotros también podemos hacer un esfuerzo hasta donde podamos, ¿no? Sin excedernos en lo que sabemos hacer. Era mi comentario.
I think the institutional responses to mental health is one issue, but we should be, and we normally are, the first contact with students, and we probably do have a role in filtering people to the right things, and that's something much more difficult in this environment. But I think Gabriela was about to talk on something on the critical issue. I'm not sure. I think she might have just disappeared. So I'm going to pronounce your name wrongly again, Alejandra. Is it? Oh no, Gabriela's back. Gabriela's back. Okay, over to you.
Hi, excuse me. Just a brief comment. I think 2 are the main things that we need to include in accounting curricula: digital transformation, digital skills, analytical skills for accountants, and sustainability concepts. Environment, society, government, in order that about Greg explained to us, to think in a more critical way, in a more broad perspective, in a more social way, we need our accountants to manage these concepts.
I think all of those things are very, very important. Things that we've been trying to do for some time. doesn't necessarily make students critical. We have to think of good ways of doing that. Alejandra?
Respecto a los cambios que se van a presentar en el currículum contable, creo que van a ser contundentes, en especial en el currículum oculto. Es decir, que vamos a trascender ya, reescribir documentos, etcétera, porque normalmente se obliga a cambiar la forma de enseñar. La educación, por lo menos en nuestro país, siempre viene dado por lineamientos, pero la pandemia ha hecho cuestionar temas más importantes y lo voy a ligar con lo relacionado con evaluación. En evaluación hemos comenzado a utilizar diferentes instrumentos como se ha mencionado, los videos, las estrategias gráficas. Yo tuve una experiencia muy bonita porque pedí en un grupo hacer alguna representación gráfica, lo que quisieran hacer, y un grupo hizo memes a partir de su cultura, de lo digital, etcétera. Presentaron eso y lograron un entendimiento bastante amplio del tema. Entonces yo creo que va a ser muy difícil retornar a esas evaluaciones basadas en la memoria, y eso es afortunado. Ese paso que yo creo que posiblemente no demos ya marcha atrás, es afortunado porque desarrolla otras habilidades, además de las que estaba mencionando Gabriela, en los estudiantes, ¿no? Otro tema es que evidenciamos las debilidades y las potencialidades, tanto docentes como estudiantes, ¿no? Nos dimos cuenta qué nos faltaba y en qué éramos buenos. Entonces eso ha hecho que ahora las clases se basen más en un aprendizaje colaborativo. Eso nos recuerda que los docentes también estamos aprendiendo y es supremamente importante que ese proceso se vaya dando como de la mano, ¿no? Y creo que en tecnologías muchas veces los estudiantes terminaron ayudándonos en algún momento y eso es pues valioso.
Yes, thank you very much. I think there's a lot of important things about the fact that, I mean, one of the things I may have misunderstood you, Alejandra, but the point is that we do have to learn together with things that you were talking about. And that's very true. Our students have things to bring to our learning as much as, well, hopefully not quite as much as we have to bring to theirs on the bounds that we're paid to be helping them to learn things. But I do think they have some very important things that they're bringing to the learning experience, not just because they're young, generally young anyway, or younger, certainly younger than me, but also, and they have a different perspective, but also because they come from different backgrounds to we do. I think it's really important that we understand that, because one of the main lessons of constructivist education is students can only learn things if they can relate things to their world, to their lived experience. So we have to at least have some feeling about what their lived experiences are, so that we can relate our ideas or the ideas of our discipline to them. And I think that's something really important, and the way that we then learn about their environment as we learn, and how our ideas work in those environments as they learn about the things that we're talking about. I think that's really very important, and I think that's one way possibly of getting into the critical area, but I might come back to that later. Claudio wants to speak, I believe.
Yeah. In terms of your comments in the critical agenda, or how to infuse critical issues in terms of social impact, I think it's more, the conversation is open now because of the pandemic. I see my students want to talk more about climate change and the impact on society. I think, and in Brazil specifically, in terms of research level, like PhD master's programs, last 10 years, I think they are much more open to this kind of conversation. Before 10 years ago, we never see anything about this kind of social discussions. It wasn't common in the accounting context. Now it's much more people doing research, provide more papers and the forums. So I think it's an optimistic view about this aspect. And I can see my undergrad students talk about climate change and going to include that. So I think overall, I think have this possibility, and I think it's a good time to try to infuse that. But my only concern was more or less related to a point about how to change the mindset. How go to approach this? It's going to be to prepare for a marathon, or we're going to prepare for a 100 meters race. So this is kind of approach. If you go too fast, maybe you take some people out of this conversation. If you go too slow, you're going to remove other people, because sometimes younger also have some kind of frustration this way, and have the climate crisis coming on very, can see some floods and so on. So this is kind of how to approach that. I'm not sure yet, but I think they are up to conversation, and the lecturers as well start to, the new generation of lecturers in Brazil are more prepared, I believe, to engage this kind of conversation.
Yeah, I think it's important that we use the opportunity of things which have public interest and interest with our students to talk about the things which are important. It is, however, accounting education, certainly in my country, has a long history of failure to really engage in this issue. When I was a student, very, very many years ago, 40 years ago plus, I think, we studied early ideas about social accounting and early ideas about employee reporting. And the Scottish Institute produced a document about the value added statement being something other than the profit and loss account. Briefly, the value added statement basically didn't calculate profit. It calculated the surplus from trade, and then talked about how that is distributed amongst the employees as well as amongst the owners of capital. So it's a kind of, in a sense, a more broader concept of contribution of companies. But a lot of this has fallen by the wayside. We've been teaching, so we've had a specialist social and environmental accounting course, undergraduate and I think postgraduate level, for at least 20, 25 years. And it is popular, but I wonder whether it really gets into changing their mindsets when they go out to become accountants. I think that's the issue, one of the issues I think we have to deal with. And I think part of the issue, to my mind, part of the issue here is about how we are scared of being in conflict with the profession. Are we scared to produce students who will disrupt? And I would like to think, or ask you to think about how you think about that, and how much courage do we have to raise these issues when we won't have students if the accounting firms don't employ them, or the accounting profession. I think that's a really interesting idea. And I'd like to hear what other people think about that. I mean, it's clearly an issue in the UK to some extent, although we are trying to move away from it. Sustainability, I think, is one of the big issues which is not scary to the profession in quite the same way as some of the other critical things, because, to put it bluntly, the big four see it as an income stream. I've silenced you. That's worrying.
Greg, I think we might be heading to the final words of everyone.
I agree. I was keeping an eye on the time, but it's not quite over to the.
We are on time.
It's so unusual for me to be on time anyway. So so I think, I mean, it's been a really interesting discussion, and I wish I could have understood the nuances of some of the bits that I've listened to and not quite got the depth of understanding, I suspect, because like many people born in the UK, we don't learn other languages well enough, and that's one of our big problems. I've said this many times and I really mean it, and I just wish I could learn languages, and I have tried but failed on every occasion. So anyway, I think it is important that we start to roll this process up, and I've asked each of the contributors here whether we're going to do this individually or as country pairs where that's the case. I hadn't really decided, actually. I hadn't really thought, but I will go down that list again and ask the people from the different countries to give some thoughts about their outcomes, if you like, from this session, and what things you would like to see being taken forward, either within the agenda of your local environment or even in a broader global environment. And that would be interesting, I think, for us all to hear. And then I will try and bring it thinking about those issues, and by trying to add some of my own, which I haven't already said. Okay, so firstly, I think we move to Mexico and Gabriela. If Gabriela's there. I know Gabriela's having.
Yes, I am, Greg.
Good. So over to you.
Okay, the idea is to share about where are we looking next in this hybrid education environment. Am I okay?
Yeah, if that's what you want to do, yes.
Yes, okay, well, I think we are looking at implementing the best of two worlds. One challenge, a big challenge, is to make as significant the interaction between students at the classroom at a distance in Zoom, for example. And right now, we are working on some specific advice that we can share with professors about how to make this interaction in the classroom. I think interaction will be the big issue. Also, how can we make the presentiality more, as we say in Spanish, memorable, more with more significant, with more meaning. Not only contents, more interaction, work in teams, but also you have to keep the physical distance in teams in teamwork. But I think interaction, a more meaningful presential experience for the students, and also to look for more alternatives in technology for facilitating this kind of delivery of the courses. I think this will be the big issues that we are thinking about in a hybrid model.
Thank you very much. Okay, and then we'll move on to Natalia and Oswald from Chile.
Maldonado. Muchas gracias. Tiendo a compartir la mayor parte de las apreciaciones que aquí se han discutido. Creo que tenemos enormes desafíos en orden a estos procesos de adaptación en esta nueva normalidad. Y nueva normalidad porque nosotros por lo menos entendemos que esto llegó para quedarse. Muchas organizaciones no van a dejar el teletrabajo. Muchas organizaciones se adaptaron a esta nueva realidad. Y también nosotros nos tenemos que hacer cargo en nuestros procesos formativos de incorporar estas nuevas habilidades para que nuestros estudiantes, particularmente contadores públicos y auditores, se puedan desempeñar en esta nueva realidad. Han sido desafíos, meses complejos. Nosotros en nuestro país no solamente nos tocó atravesar por la crisis sanitaria, sino que también por una crisis social que implicó adaptarnos también en la forma en la cual nos relacionábamos con nuestros estudiantes. Y en ese escenario creo que los grandes desafíos, por lo menos en la Universidad de Valparaíso, en nuestra escuela, pasaron por llevar rápidamente esta nueva contingencia, esta nueva realidad al aula. Explicarle a nuestros estudiantes cómo se iban a enfrentar ellos a esta nueva realidad. Y creo que eso ha sido bastante beneficioso para nosotros porque no había tiempo. No había tiempo, alumnos de cuarto, quinto año a puertas de la licenciatura ya debían incorporar estas nuevas habilidades que, insisto, por ahí hay unos artículos muy buenos de cuál es la variable que impulsó la transformación digital en las organizaciones y aparece el COVID. No fueron ni los gerentes, no fue ni el directorio, fue el COVID que nos dijo a la 1, a las 2 y a las 3, todos a transformación digital. Y nosotros tampoco estábamos muy preparados desde el punto de vista de los contenidos de las asignaturas para hacernos cargo de eso. Y desde el punto de vista de la responsabilidad que nos compete como académicos, nos adaptamos y empezamos a entregar esas nuevas habilidades que obviamente ahora pasan por adecuar la estructura académica completa. Y con esto cierro agradeciendo la invitación, agradeciendo la iniciativa, e insisto, creo que uno de los grandes beneficios que nos dejó la pandemia es poder interactuar y poder juntarnos de esta manera. Distintas visiones, distintos países, distintas lenguas, pero detrás de un fin común que es el que nos gusta a todos, que es poder impulsar la contabilidad, la auditoría, donde realmente debe estar dentro de las organizaciones. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I'll be honest, I didn't catch much of that on my translator. Anna, can you give me a very brief synopsis of that so that I can respond later? Thanks.
Yeah, I can. So Osvaldo was talking about all the difficulties that we had with the pandemic, but also the if you can say maybe the good sides that we, for example, could be all together from different countries, from different languages. So all this we have, kind of catch up what we learned, what we had, what we experienced, and then see how we can, move on and see how this like maybe new normalcy will work, and also he was saying thank you for this event, and also again, because for him it's very good to see like different people, different ways of thinking, working to be, like a better accountancy profession, auditing and everything. I think it's a very brief resume.
That's fine. I did get some of that, but I didn't get most of it, but thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Greg, just to let you know, we will work maybe transcripting the event after, so then we can work on the translations, and then we will have in the 3 languages, so it might be.
Okay. So we now move to Argentina, and I must admit the thing that struck me most about your presentation was how massive your student population is. And it scares me that your accounting department is half the size of our university. And we're a big university in our context. So that's a really notable issue. And it does bring to mind some of the big problems we have when we start assessing, evaluating, marking students, grading students at such large scale. And I'll just say that within the report there, within the contributions, there was a contribution from somebody from Egypt, Sama, who is similarly in the massive class, and I thought her account was just astonishing. And I know Sama, so I kind of knew what was coming in that respect. But my two co-authors on this paper were absolutely astonished by the volume of stuff that she had to deal with. Anyway, so that's interesting. So I hope you haven't undercut what you were going to say. But so Ines Garcia and Oscar, I'll be honest, I always get confused with Spanish names as to which ones to actually use and which ones to miss out, because there's always so many names, and I'm never sure whether it's the first, second, or last one which I meant to use. But anyway, so Ines Garcia and Oscar Fernandez, over to you. You're going to speak? You're both on mute at the moment.
Hola, hola. ¿Se escucha ahí? Bueno, importante todo lo que escuchamos, porque un poco nos deja tranquilos de ver que la problemática es similar para todos, ¿no? Uno parece que los problemas fueran solo propios, pero al compartirlos tienen otra dimensión. A ver, para nosotros nos parece que una preocupación importante en este momento es ir pensando cómo vamos a volver a la presencialidad. No es el proceso inverso a pasar de la presencialidad a la virtualidad, o no debería ser, porque ese proceso fue un proceso disruptivo, un proceso que no nos permitió pensar cómo hacerlo. Y ahora creo que tenemos el desafío de planificar procesos, de planificar mecanismos, de definir estructuras, incluso edilicias, tecnológicas, con el tiempo suficiente como para que cuando volvamos a la presencialidad se pueda volver con orden, ¿no? Nosotros lo vemos un poco, a lo mejor en nuestra universidad, en la UBA, que es una universidad pública, con lo cual tiene todas las dificultades que tiene cualquier organismo público, quizás distinto a una entidad privada, que es gratuita, que es masiva, ¿no? Que tiene una cantidad de cuestiones propias, y donde, como dijeron muchos, y es muy importante, y a lo mejor hablaban antes de la salud mental, pero donde hay que tener en cuenta muchos factores de los alumnos, por un lado, y factores algunos que parecen menores, pero en este año y medio de pandemia, por ejemplo, en Buenos Aires, muchas familias se trasladaron a vivir a lugares fuera de la ciudad, a 30, 40, 50 kilómetros de la ciudad. Bueno, hoy toda esa gente tiene dificultades para desplazarse físicamente, presencialmente a una clase, porque antes vivía cerca de esas universidades y ahora a lo mejor no, y todo eso va a haber que tenerlo en cuenta. Hay un plantel muy numeroso de docentes y de no docentes, con una diversidad de rangos etarios importantes, y eso hace que riesgos de salud y diferentes niveles de vacunación, y por lo tanto también diferentes posibilidades de volver físicamente a dar clases presenciales. Es decir, una cantidad de cuestiones que, digamos, resumiendo, para no hacerlo muy largo, termina pensando si vamos a poder se adapte al modelo de educación que quisiéramos, o de alguna manera vamos a tener que terminar adaptando la educación a la sociedad que tenemos, ¿no? Al entorno que tenemos, a la sociedad que tenemos y a lo que se puede hacer. Así que nos parece que por ahí pasa un desafío importante, y creo que este tipo de jornadas y saber cuáles son todas estas problemáticas que se están dando y que se vinieron dando son muy importantes para que vayamos encontrando algunos de esos caminos. Bueno, nada más eso.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to get an echo. And can you give me, again, a very brief
Yes, sure. So he was talking about, he was relieved to see that the problems are, you know, kind of the same, even in different countries and different contexts, of course, different dynamics, but it's, you know, like he can relate to a lot of what was everyone was saying. Also, one of the biggest challenges was the how we can handle this coming back to in-person teaching, because it's not the same process that we had in the beginning of the pandemic. You know, like the process of going online, it was like a disruptive process. It's like, you know, tomorrow you have to be online, but now we have time and we have to plan everything. And so how we will be back, it will be a challenge that we have to discuss. The structures and everything. University of Buenos Aires is a public university, and they have a lot of difficulties just as another public university, for example, and like different students have a lot different difficulties, and also the professors. But one of the things that Oscar highlighted was, for example, the families, some of the families are not living in the cities right now. They went like 40 or 50 kilometers far from the university, for example, and how these students will commute, because they are not living anymore in Buenos Aires or in the big cities, and how they will commute back, and how they will, you know, attend the classes every day in person. The vaccination ranges are different ages, different people. So this we have like the first doses, second doses in different people from different ages. So this is also something that we have to think about when people are going back to the university in person. And the last topic is like, he was saying that, should we think about the university and the model of education we want, or should we think about the education and the formats that society wants from us as educators? So that's it.
Thank you very much. That was very good. Very nice. A lot of very nice ideas there. So we now move to Brazil with Claudio and Kate. I have to remember to say O at the end, don't I? Not Claudia. I've learned that bit. But Claudio and Kate.
Okay. First of all, thank you all our colleagues from Latin America. It was amazing experience for us to listen the exchanges, and as Oscar said, similar points that you could relate easily, inequality and the challenges for digital transformation as keywords for that. So, as I was mentioning all the presentations, I guess everybody was disrupted, but the main message that we got here that it was difficult, a lot of challenges, but you see a lot of opportunities. People have learned how to deal somehow with the situation and have become a bit better in some ways, and I hope that some of the good experience can carry on for the future. In particular, there's a topic that you have been studying before the pandemic. That's this idea of the digital transformation, especially in the management account profession. And you see a lot of that. And before the pandemic, I was very concerned about inequality, because from the data that we got, you see companies, especially from United States and the developed countries, adopting in a very fast way this new technology, and it create a huge gap in the profession between people that is doing artificial intelligence and this kind of things, and people learn to do, like, to deal with a spreadsheet in Excel, for example. And I saw this pandemic as a kind of opportunity, because people was more concerned and it was exposed to this technology before the natural timeline that you would be exposed to. And the people start to talk about this technology, the the politicians, the companies start to face this reality, and this might reduce the gap, yeah, in terms of inequality of digital skills, because they had to face first the usual pace. So I think this is a positive thing, but I believe still be a huge gap that we need to discuss and to talk about. And probably Greg's going to get a lot of papers in the future for account education, the post-pandemic era. So discuss this kind of digital transformation, the impact of pandemic. And as you suggest in our presentation, Greg mentioned, in terms of the Big Four and the professional boards, you see, you believe that they're going to be key. As educators, we need to try to engage a conversation and try to infuse these ideas, how to create an open access platform to reduce this inequality as well. You try to have a win-win situation. I think it will be a big challenge, but I don't know, ESG and this kind of climate change could be a open start for the conversation, and then try to engage other issues like social inequality and other aspects that's important for Latin America. So thank you very much for sharing the experience, and hope to have other talks.
Thank you very much. And I think we move last to Colombia and Mary and Alejandra. Am I getting your name right eventually?
Alejandra, perfecto. Bueno, en nombre de Alejandra, pues ahí muy brevemente, digamos desde mi visión, pues obviamente no repetir lo que ya han dicho anteriormente, porque yo estaría de acuerdo con todo lo que se ha mencionado. Agregaría a esa lista cuestiones relacionadas con lo que nosotros deberíamos estar promoviendo en cualquier profesión, en cualquier espacio de formación relacionado con lo que es pensamiento crítico, aunque yo cuando lo hablo con mis estudiantes no me gusta llamarlo pensamiento crítico o critical thinking, sino pensamiento argumentado, sustentado, porque lamentablemente en esta sociedad tan conectada, o que recibe tanta información, parece que eso está actuando en contravía, ¿no? Nos dicen, por ejemplo, las vacunas son malas y ya mucha gente cree que eso es así porque alguien lo dijo, o la Tierra es plana y ya eso tiene cantidad de personas, digamos, creyendo esas cosas. Entonces, ¿cómo promover en nuestros estudiantes de contaduría? ¿Cómo promover más y más estas estrategias que fortalezcan pensamiento crítico, alineado con todo lo que hemos dicho del avance de la profesión, el avance hacia lo digital y hacia las habilidades blandas, como se le ha llamado, soft skills. También me parece muy importante cómo seguir promoviendo pues lo transdisciplinar y sobre todo mirar la contabilidad como lo que es, como una ciencia social, ¿no? No como lo tradicional que muchas veces uno dice, bueno, vamos a hacer un evento en contabilidad cualitativa, en contabilidad crítica, o ver la contabilidad desde el género, o ver la contabilidad desde tantas perspectivas como una ciencia que informa, que reporta, que comunica. Y muchas veces nos preguntan, ¿y eso es contabilidad? O sea, siempre como que trabajándolo desde ese punto de vista más amplio, más social, lo que decía también Gabriela, ¿no? El aspecto social de la contabilidad, dónde está quedando, y creo que ahí tenemos que ir. Y desde la práctica de lo que hemos visto, lo que se ha, digamos, ha emergido más aún en esto de la pandemia, cómo nosotros apuntarle a superar, a mejorar las condiciones que se han evidenciado tan brutalmente de desigualdad, y cómo también evitar lo que hemos hablado, ¿no? La parte de salud mental, cómo evitar estas situaciones de agotamiento. Que sin duda pues queremos hacer muchas cosas, pero tanto estudiantes como profesores también llegamos a unas situaciones de agotamiento, de burnout terribles que pues también nos limitan, ¿no? A llegar a las metas que queremos. Entonces serían como lo que yo aportaría a todo lo que se está diciendo. No sé si Alejandra quiere agregar algo más, pero antes pues dejarle como el resumen a Greg en inglés. Greg, just a summary about the
Okay,
issues.
my translation system worked on your voice very well, so I think I got what you were saying. So,
Okay.
that was Yeah,
that's fine.
So I did get that. Thank you very much for those comments.
And just a final, I just want to add my words, my recognition for this project, this research, this paper you put together with Professor Barbara and Alan. The idea is to keep working on these topics because it's very important to put together the community. Yeah, this is just an outcome of the really important project. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that sentiment, Mary. I mean, I'll start with that point. I think the journal in the UK arose in this particular journal, Accounting Education, developed in the UK alongside the Accounting Education Special Interest Group, which I am also chair of, as it happens, of BAFA. And we do have a conference which used to be heavily aligned with the journal, but they have separated a little. But we see both to be about building community and the Accounting Education Thing, although it's British, is really an international event. We tend to have at least as many people from overseas as we do from locally, and particularly this year when it was online. So you're all welcome to this event, however we hold it in the future. And there will be one next May. I'm not sure how it's going to run yet, but there will be one. But I think that links very, very well with one of the issues that I think was raised here, about us being a connected society globally, not just as accounting educators, but globally we are one society, really. I know we split up into different factions and different groups, and we have national boundaries, but so much of what we do transcends those boundaries. Climate change being the most obvious at the moment, in one of the most public awareness. But it's important to remember that accounting is part of that thing which does breach those national boundaries, that does have global influence. For right or wrong, this has come about largely through Anglo-American kind of institutions. And it's important that we think about how we shape those. And I think it's important from us as educators to think how we shape our students to go into this world with a critical attitude, to think about how we can shape accounting to help things which are important to you, to us, to them. And that's not always the same as the interests of IFRS, the Big Four, or whatever. And it's interesting that accounting for many, throughout history has kind of been a service to others. We use accounting for purpose, and accounting can be used for many reasons. It doesn't have to be used to support the capitalist regime. It can be used to help question that through their own language, and through changing the language, or trying to change the language in which we communicate financial results and other things for which people should be accountable for. Because to me, accounting isn't just the financial numbers. To me, accounting, the idea of accounting, comes from those very old ideas of accountability, of somebody being accountable to somebody else. I think different from those old ideas of proprietorship in terms of accountable to your master, we are now accountable to each other, and we're accountable to the world, to the global environment. And I think we have to think about how we can change not just our curriculum, but to change the way we get students to engage in that curriculum, so that they are facilitated to think about doing those things. They won't all want to do what I would want them to do, Some of them will want to use these techniques to further their own capitalist adventures. That's fine. We live in a free society, but we have to educate people so that they can use these things, these techniques, these methods, this rhetoric, this idea, in order to think broadly. And one of the things that comes up in two aspects here is an issue of diversity. We are all very different, and bringing difference together helps. As I think at least two people have commented, one of the good things of the pandemic is you have started engaging in your teaching with people from other countries more than you would before. Similarly, I think it's true that our conferences and things, and this event is probably more international than it might otherwise have been because of the online situation. Although, to be perfectly honest, it wouldn't take very much to persuade me to fly to Colombia or Brazil or somewhere else to do this, but that's another issue. But it does reduce those transaction costs, if you like. So that diversity is important, but it's also important we think about the diversity in different methods. And I think diversity in opportunity is one of the biggest issues. Diversity and opportunity is another way of talking about deprivation, perhaps, or lack of resources and things like that. And I think we do need to think about that in an accounting sense. And that does require us to think about accounting as being what are we accountable for in a different way. And I think I've kind of half said that before. I think one of the other things that has been talked about is coming back to campus, and this is a massively difficult problem. I'm a manager and I have this problem, and part of it is because students want to come back, but they want the option. Staff, some want to go back, but an awful lot are scared of going back and don't want to go back. Some do, some don't. How do we deal with these issues? How do we deal with the fear that the pandemic has created? And I think the pandemic has created a degree of fear, and to some extent has reinforced that notion of the other, somebody other than us, somebody other than our kind. And I think this is something we do need to be very careful of, because otherwise we'll create barriers which will be problematic as we go forward in time. You know, it has not been unheard of in the early days of the pandemic for Chinese people in several countries to be treated badly, because that's where the virus came from. Well, whether it did or not, I think it did, but that doesn't mean that the Chinese that we see in our countries are responsible. And I think it's really important we do need to think about these sorts of things carefully. I am over time, so I'm very conscious of that. But I think we also have to think about our students and how they relate to us. And one of the big issues that we have to deal with, and we have to encourage students to be able to cope with, we have to encourage students to cope with discomfort. Students like being passive. They like being told what they need to know. They like being told what to do to pass the exam. What they don't like being asked to do is to deal with problems which are very messy. But that's our world. It is messy. And if we're going to do them justice, we have to think of building our curriculum in a way that helps them deal with that messiness, not just makes everything clean and tidy like a nice set of balanced accounts. And I will end on that point, except to say thank you all very much for inviting me to participate in this. It's been really interesting, and I think it's, you know, it's just a really good sharing of experience, and something which is I have learned from, and I hope you have too. So thank you very much, particularly the Sylvia and co from the QRCA for organising this, and for being being proponents of this critical mass. And I think that's really important. So thank you very much, and I'll end there. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Greg. Yo quiero hablar unas palabras, então peço a todos que esperen un poquito. Tenemos un mensaje muy importante sobre el proyecto que Greg hizo mención, pero mejor que hablar es mostrarte para que puedan asistir a un video que explica el proyecto. I will show you a video about Breaking Boundaries project so that you can learn about it. Greg mentioned it many times, so I think it's perfect with the last words that Greg just told us. So please, Douglas, if you can share the video.
In and of itself, it holds no more.
Over the past few weeks, we have witnessed the emergence of a previously unknown pathogen.
L'épidémie de Covid-19 était peut-être pour certains d'entre vous une idée lointaine. Elle est devenue une réalité immédiate, pressante.
A partir de mañana martes, 17 de marzo, a las 5 de la mañana, Venezuela entera entra en cuarentena social. Medida drástica necesaria. Cuarentena social.
I ask you all just more 5 minutes so I can give you the last information about QR Network and our next events. While Douglas is showing us, I just want to thank you all for being here, all the professors. It's been a pleasure to have you all here. Also, I want to say, sorry, we are doing our best, for the translations and everything. So this always, we call it a Babel in a lot of languages, a lot of people from different countries. So it's a very, trick thing to do. Bueno, yo quiero solo decir muchas gracias a todos que están aquí con nosotros. Es siempre una dificultad un reto bastante grande para nosotros hacer todo en diferentes idiomas y estamos intentando lo mejor que podemos. Como siempre hacemos también, les mostramos nuestra contabilidad y queremos agradecer a todas las personas que nos han ayudado con las donaciones para que hagan posible las traducciones. Tenemos dos para el próximo. También pedimos a ustedes que nos ayuden con su retroalimentación. Ese es el último evento del año y bueno, ya vamos a empezar tal vez pensar cuáles son los próximos de 2022. Yo sé que en el chat muchas personas han tenido ideas y los pido que por favor nos escriban sus ideas, que compartan sus experiencias, que va a ser muy bueno para la red QRCA y también para el próximo año. Thank you being here today, but we also ask that if you can please share your thoughts, your ideas for next events, for another teams that you want to discuss. I know that in the chat, a lot of people were saying a lot of different ideas, so please write to us so we can improve our work here as a network. We also want to thank you all the panelists, Professor Greg, Professor Gabriela, Professor Natalia, Professor Osvaldo, Professor Inez, Professor Oscar, Professor Claudio, Professor Kate, Professor Mari, Professor Alejandra. It's been a pleasure to have you all here. We want to thank Accounting Education, and also we want to thank our team that are helping us through this year with translation. We have to thank Calliope for helping us. And in the name of Lívia, Sharona, and Ramon and Aldo that are here today doing the Portuguese translation, thank you very much for your job being here with us today and through this whole year. I have to say a lot of thank yous today because it's the last event of the year. I want to thank you, everyone to be here, but also the people. We wanted to show you the faces that are doing these events through the year. So Sylvia, Anna, who is me, Douglas, Ellen, Janaína, Denise, Juliana, Mika, and Carmen. We are, like almost every Saturday working to make these webinars work. So it's been a lot of work, right, guys? And last but not least, I want to remind you guys that we have the QRCA conference in 16, 17, and 18 of November, but also we have the Graduate Consortium on the 4th and 5th of November. So please attend to the event. A lot of these discussions I think will be also held during the conference. So thank you very much for being here. And the last one, keep up with us, tell your ideas. If you want to help, let's make, the network will just work if everyone is involved, right? So we are stronger together. Thank you very much.
Sentimiento no lo ha podido él saber, ni el más claro proceder, ni el más ancho pensamiento, todo lo cambia al momento, cual mago condescendiente nos aleja dulcemente de rencores y violencias. Solo el amor con su ciencia nos vuelve tan inocentes.
Se va enredando, enseñando, como en el muro la piedra, y va brotando, brotando, como el mosquito en la piedra. Como el mosquito en la piedra, ay, sí, sí, sí.
El amor es torbellino de puris original, hasta el feroz animal susurra su dulce trino, detiene a los peregrinos, libera a los prisioneros. El amor con sus esmeros al viejo lo vuelve un niño y al malo solo el cariño lo vuelve puro y sincero.
Se va enredando, enredando, como en el muro la piedra, y va brotando, brotando, como el mosquito en la piedra. Como el mosquito en la piedra, ay, sí, sí, sí.
De par en par la ventana se abrió como por encanto y entra el amor con su manto como una tibia mañana y al son de su bella diana hizo brotar al jazmín volando con serafín al cielo le puso aretes y mis años 17 los convirtió el querubín.
Se va enredando, enredando, como en el muro la piedra, y va brotando, brotando, como el mosquito en la piedra. Como el mosquito en la piedra, ay, sí, sí, sí.
Muchas gracias a todos, todas e todas. Muito obrigada a todos, todas e todas. Thank you very much. Thank you all. See you in 2022 with our next webinars. And don't forget our conference that is coming November, okay? Nos vemos en nuestra conferencia después, en 2022. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, feliz tarde.
Obrigada.
Good evening.
Gracias a todos.
Adiós.
Aldo, Ramon, muito obrigada também pela
Obrigada.
tradução.
Muito
Prazer ter
obrigada.
vocês
intérpretes.
aqui.